very warm welcome to EurActiv, the European Affairs channel here exclusively on YouTube. Today we are here in the studio of the European Commission in the Berlaymont building in Brussels, and we have a discussion about the future of Europe, the state of the European Union, with journalists covering the EU and covering European related issues here in Brussels and elsewhere in Europe. With me here is Lisbeth Kirk, the editor and founder of EUobserver.com, a website with daily information about the EU and the European Union. Alex Koronakis, editor of New Europe, a weekly that publishes for people in all of Europe. We have Teresa Kuchler from Sweden, a Swedish freelance journalist, and from Maastricht, an English journalist, more than 25 years of experience, Stafford Wadsworth. Lisbeth, let's start with you. We had the European elections basically 48 hours ago. What do you consider the most important element coming out of these elections?
The thing is that I don't think there has been a lot of important things coming out of these elections. It's very much been what we've seen before. We still have the two big parties. They'll still have the socialists and the conservatives. They will still have to go together to form the majority. And the turnout was, as we've also seen before, quite low. So I would say there are news, bits of pieces here and there, but the overall result is that nothing has really changed.
We saw a huge loss for the socialist, Martin Schulz, the leader of the socialists, quite depressed on Sunday night. We also saw a resurgence of some of the right-wing parties, especially in the UK and the Netherlands. That doesn't make any significant changes?
The only sort of cross-European trend you could take out of this is that people reacted to the economical downturn and the crisis by not voting for Socialists and Social Democrats, Labour Party. They didn't trust them, apparently, to solve the crisis, but in larger numbers turned to the Conservatives. This is the overall trend. But then if you go into it, you'll also see that it was very much 27 national elections, because in some countries you saw the right-wingers booming, in others they completely disappeared. So it's very mixed country by country what was actually the outcome, and a lot of it was reaction to national political events, to governments being in crisis, like in the UK, for example. You saw that UKIP had a very great result, but was that because of UKIP doing very well? Was it because they're more critical towards Brussels? Or was it maybe just because they couldn't vote for the government of Gordon Brown and all the scandals they've had there with the expenses?
We'll get back to that later. Teresa, in Sweden we saw a very interesting winner, the Pirate Party. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, it's one seat, so it's been very, very boosted as a huge entry to Brussels for the Pirates. It's one seat, so maybe the political impact is not going to be as big as most people have predicted.
Was the debate a national one in Sweden?
It was a very national debate, and it was hijacked completely by the pirates issue, almost completely, which actually forced all the other parties to be more active. It was a very vivid debate for an EU Parliament debate, I have to say. Our national debate was very vivid, and the turnout was higher than expected, and it's because the other parties were forced to go in and try to speak up to the Pirate Party.
The Pirate Party, of course, has nothing to do with piracy in Somalia, but it's got everything to do with copyrights. They are saying, well, let's ban copyrights. Why did that issue become such a big issue in Sweden?
Well, in terms of downloading statistics, I think Sweden is the highest number of people who actively download. We have computerized. Every home has an internet connection, so of course it's a country where these things are important. There were also a couple of very high-profile court cases against downloading issues. There was this Pirate Bay case, where 4 founders of a website which was accused of being accessory for illegal downloading. It was the court sentence came out in March, just ahead of the election
campaign. That, of course, created a lot of publicity for the Pirate Party. Did they get? They also took part in elections in other countries, I think. I'm not sure if they got any seats over there.
They didn't get any seats.
No,
they wanted to have
a
big European manifesto joined. It was a big plan, but I think a lot of countries weren't ready for it. But maybe for 2014, that's what they're aiming at now.
Alex, you work here in Brussels, but you are Greek by origin.
Yes.
Did you vote in Brussels, or did you vote in
I
Greece?
voted in Brussels for the Greek election at the
And
council.
how was the debate in Greece like? Was it national or was it European?
Well, the debate in Greece was quite national. In Greece, there's all these scandals going on all the time, so the debate is always very national. Citizens didn't vote as much as they usually do. Voting is compulsory in Greece, but citizens abroad voted very well.
And which party should we look out for in the European Parliament?
Well, the extreme right, Laos, has 2 seats now in the Parliament. Other than that, EPP and the PES groups have 8 seats each, so they're on an equal footing.
Stafford, you live in the Netherlands. Of course, the Netherlands, Geert Wilders, his PVV Freedom Party gaining 4 seats. We had that news on just before the other countries started to vote already. Some people here in this building are not too happy with that the Dutch released the results before then. But still, we're getting 4 new right-wing faces from the Netherlands. Do you think that is something that will be able to affect the debate in Brussels?
I don't think it will affect the debate in Brussels, because I think the debate in Brussels is a rather sort of disconnected, disengaged activity. But I do think it's indicative of a fairly general move in Europe, and sees these right-wing parties popping up all over the place. And I think you can really see the origins or the causes for this if you look at the history of Europe since the Second World War, when we've seen that sort of normal conservative right-wing expression has been sort of condemned as racist or fascist, and of course it's all coloured with the experience of the Second World War. So it meant that in continental Europe to sort of say something like British and best, which we used to say in the 1950s, or eigen volk eerst, or something like that, was immediately sort of seen as a sort of fascist observation, whereas this is in fact what most people feel. They tend to feel that their own people and their own way of doing things is the best. And I think this is sort of a reassertion of normal conservative thinking. I think it's the sort of nemesis really being visited upon those awful 60s thinkers who took away decision-making power from European politics and substituted very, very strange, politically correct ideologies. That's my feeling about it. Yeah.
Is that do you fear a return to more right-wing extremism in Europe at the expense of the socialists?
No, I think what will happen is that the Christian Democrats, the liberals, the halfway house rightists will realize that they've got to take some of this on board. No, I don't think that the sort of extreme right-wing parties, I don't think they're going to make it, but I think their ideology will seep into the larger conservative parties and redress the balance, really. Why shouldn't you stand up for your own country? Why shouldn't you prefer to speak your own language or whatever? That's my sort of general feeling.
So it looks clear, it points clearly in the direction of a bit more nationalism in the European debate.
So. A bit more, I'd say a bit more conservatism. I'd sort of, I think I would shy away from nationalism in Europe. I think people in Europe generally understand that, we've got to get on together in some way. You see this with Germany and France. But I think that there must be a place for normal conservatism, would seem to me.
Lisbeth, how do you see the state of conservatism?
Well, I think it's interesting that it went so different in the different countries, because in the Netherlands, where you're from, it's an obvious new trend that you had such a strong result for the far right. The same in the UK, but if you turn to other countries, it was completely opposite.
The opposite?
Yeah, if you go to Poland, for example, the whole right wing has been wiped out. It didn't get a seat. So the Polish simply cleaned up their...
Are there specific reasons for that in Poland?
They simply cleaned up the table. Yeah. I don't know why they did this, but it's just... Talking about a European trend, at least you have to admit that it's not the same in all parts of Europe. It's very different country by country what has happened here.
Not at all, but I mean, I think there's been a general move against the left, hasn't there? I thought that was...
In general, yes.
Yeah, I think in general.
But look at Belgium and Flanders, the loss of the Flemish bloc. another right-wing laws
Exactly.
is also
But
fitting into that picture.
they still have quite a few voters, don't they?
They won't.
But
They are very, very close to be able to form a political group in the European Parliament. But
Yeah.
it's not just very close. They're
Yeah.
not bigger than they might not even be able to make one political group
But
in
then
the
again,
Parliament.
what you said before about the actual political impact of these elections is you still have the biggest groups. Well, you'd have 4 groups in Parliament who would keep doing their compromises. So even if you have a far-right party, the political undercurrent of this is not going to be very, very strong. However, for studying trends in Europe, whether you think it's scary or not that you have a rising far-right, that's for others to study. But I don't think in the European Parliament it's going to have a lot of impact because the 4 biggest parties are going to keep dealing amongst themselves about their...
Last time around, the ITS didn't get treated very seriously. People were clapping when the party collapsed. But it's true that we have a more extreme right in the parliament, and I think it's voices that have to be heard because they are part of democracy too. Now, whether we like it or not is a different issue, but we do have to respect them.
But still very interesting to see what happens in Poland, what happens in Belgium, and in the Netherlands. I'm Dutch myself. I hear a lot of people saying, well, Geert Wilders and the PVV are criticizing a lot of the system, but what solutions do they have? They don't seem to have any workable solutions, at least not yet. So maybe that the lack of such solutions in Belgium and Poland may also be a factor in the losses
You could actually
there.
see a bit the same trend if you watch the results of the Green Party, which had an overall, they gained seats in the total, but again you have very different results from different countries. They did very well in France, very well, while in Ireland they were also having a catastrophic result. We need to dig deeper into the reasons for this, but it's that's why I say that the European trends in these are very few, if any, just that people didn't trust the socialists to clean up the mess of the economy. They rather trust the right-wingers.
But they've trusted the socialists since the 60s. So that's a sort of major change, isn't it?
Let's talk about turnout for a little bit. Turnout at 43%, falling again for a 7th consecutive time that we had public elections in the European Union. If you look at the graph, it really is a sliding scale. Alex?
I certainly think that it's something that we have to look at. I don't think that we should have a parliament voted for by 40% of the people. I'd be happy if we had, 80 or 90. And I think that the spectrum of the political groups would be very different if we did. I don't think we'd have so many, extreme right inside the parliament.
Do you see it as a sign that the European Union is disconnected from its people?
I don't know whether it's disconnected from its people. I think that a communication effort that has happened hasn't been so successful. At the same time, the union was structured to be an economic union, and now we're moving to a more political Europe. So perhaps it's the structure that it's at fault.
Stafford, low turnout in the Netherlands as well?
Yes. I think that it does reveal a level of disconnection. I don't know whether I'd go as far as to say that it's that it makes the community illegitimate as such, but I think there is a sort of general lack of interest, and I think the reason for that is because it's all list politics, isn't it? You vote for one or you vote for two. You are not the constituent of somebody who is in Brussels looking after you. And I'm wondering if it would be possible for us to get constituency politics into the European Union. One thing that did occur to me, because of my own personal interests, was that you do have in Europe some 200 Euro regions, cross-border regions, where people have the opportunity of acting together. And I wondered whether it would be possible to get constituency politics to represent these Euro regions. I mean, in the area where we live, there is a dialect. I mean, there are 3 national languages that are spoken, German, French and Dutch, but there is a dialect which is spoken by most of the non-French speaking people in the area. There is a sort of a cross-border fellowship which doesn't extend to the national capitals, for example. And I wonder whether one couldn't sort of do something to foster that sort of comradeship and develop constituency politics in the Euro regions. It's just an idea that's been going through my head.
Lisbeth, we heard some people after the European elections talk about the idea of also getting European voting lists. Maybe that could be combined with the idea of such a constituency. Do you think that could improve turnout?
I think that improving turnout, you really need to be able to offer people something that is worth voting for. I mean, we have to admit, and people know this, that the European Parliament is not making the decisions in Europe. They have an advisory role. Sometimes they have also real influence, but then it's more due to some MEPs having real good connections, networking, working like lobbyists, being able to influence things. So we cannot ask people to come out in huge numbers and vote for European Parliament that doesn't have much influence. I mean, sorry, we have other things to spend our time on. We have children, we have to cut our lawn and do our laundry and many other things. So that's one thing. I think if there was ever an election for example, the Commission, which has a lot of power, people would probably find it more interesting to go and cast their ballot and think it was more worth their time.
Teresa?
Yeah, I think the question whether the legitimacy, I think that the Swedish experience from this year is a paradox in itself. There's one party who sweeps in, takes 7% of money. It's a sign of maybe it's a healthy sign. There's, the established parties cannot just relax, become sloppy and lazy. This is good for democracy. There's a pulse in the political life. On the other hand, the turnout was low. But I have to say, the Swedish experience says that if you have a message that can catch the voter, they will go. On the other hand, this is a one-issue party, so it's, of course, the rest of all the important issues are not dealt with. So I think it's difficult to say. I think the Pirate Party was a good example of a vibrant democratic pulse, but it's also a sad example of how little the European Parliament election actually interests most voters. They will go for one issue and that's it.
But it was also different from country to country again, I have to say that. In some countries actually more people went to vote. For example, in Sweden, the turnout went up. In Estonia it went up, could be because they for the first time had online polling, so it was really easy to go and vote. In Poland it went up, could be because Poland might get a president of the European Parliament, so there was something in it for the Polish. In Denmark it went up as well. That's because it was connected with a referendum on the royal house that also boosted turnout. So and again it spans from something like 20% in Slovakia to 60% in Denmark, which is my country. Very big difference from country to country.
Let's look forward to what's going to happen in the next few months in the European Union. We have at the end, of course, the debate on climate change, the UN conference in Copenhagen, your country. We have the Lisbon Treaty on the Lisbon Treaty referendum coming up in Ireland at the end of October. And also in the next few months, the discussion on the future structure of the European Commission. Does this vote, as we've seen it in the European Parliament, does that say anything, Alex, about the chances for Jose Manuel Barroso of having a second term as president of the Commission?
Well, the mainstream press, the international press, FT, I think has certainly reported so, that Barroso's chances are much higher now that he has achieved this EPP security in the Parliament. But as we said, we're not voting for the Parliament, we're not voting for the Commission, we're voting for the Parliament. And I think that as a communication tool, Barroso is using the EU elections, which is good for him. But I don't know if it's an 100% sure thing that he will get this re-election, and not as quickly maybe as he may want it. It may be I'm wrong, but I think that we have to wait and see. The Irish referendum is a very important thing. I mean, we have to judge the Barroso Commission from something, and the Lisbon Treaty has so far not succeeded.
Lisbeth, how do you see Barroso's chances?
I'd say if it's been the opposite result, that the centre-right had not improved or held the seats they have, it would have been worse. I think he has a good position now to continue. Of course it's not for sure, but he will have to secure a majority in the Parliament. And if you look at the figures, he cannot have it just from the EPP group, which is his own base. He needs to have support from somebody else. And there are very few alliances that can actually produce this majority. It seems from the figures that we have so far, they're not the final ones, that it can only be done again if he has an alliance with the Social Democrats, the Socialists, to produce this will be again the Grand Coalition, as I say it. Even if he goes with the UEN, the Liberals, the other sort of centre-right parties, it won't be enough. And there's also not a majority on the left side. If you put the Greens, the Social Democrats, perhaps the leftists, together, they cannot produce the majority.
And
Stafford, Teresa, go ahead.
And I don't see any other candidate. We're only a couple of months away, and there's still not somebody out there in the press saying, I want to get Barroso's job. There are a couple of names flying around, but no country has said firmly, we want this man or this woman. So I don't see anybody else. Will they just get a man out of a hat just a couple of weeks before?
From what I remember, the EPP didn't announce a candidate so early last time around either.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, Martins, when we interviewed him on Sunday, he said that he wants a stronger, more political commission, but at the same time supporting Barroso. But the question is he up for the task? Can he do it?
There was some talk also about Martin Schulz, the leader of the Socialists in the European Parliament. He's actually from your neck of the woods, from Aachen. There was also some talk that he would be the next German commissioner. What's the feeling? Do you think that he could have a chance, despite that big loss that the Socialists have incurred?
Well, they've still got more than a foothold in the Aachen region, in the Cologne presidency. But I must be quite honest, it's not something that's really animated me in recent months, and I wouldn't be able to say too much about Barroso either. I would recognise him and not quite be able to understand what he's saying. But apart from that, I suppose this, in a sense, represents my own disconnection from the machinations
it's very clear,
in higher
outside
spheres.
the Brussels bubble, and we're all inside the bubble over here.
I have really no comment. Clearly, if Mr. Schulz were to be pushed forward, although I'm not a socialist, I would clearly support him. But no, I feel sort of a bit at loss, really, to say anything about this particular topic.
Yeah. Teresa, the Lisbon Treaty, of course, one of the highlights on the European agenda in the second half of this year. Ireland been asked to schedule a date for the referendum now. What is your view on that? What do you think will happen in Ireland?
I think they're going to vote yes. That's just my own speculation. In terms of the meaning, I think we're going to see the autumn is going to be very, very empty of political initiative. That's what one of the effects of the European Parliament election here is, that they cannot really start with anything before the Lisbon situation is settled. So the sooner the better for a decision, any decision. This is going to be the Parliament's job, this is going to be the Swedish presidency's job to try to create some kind of legal legislative initiative on anything, because they don't know what the game is going to be with or without the Lisbon Treaty. I think the Irish will vote yes. If you look at the turnout, if you look at the results in the Irish vote for the Parliament election, every anti-Lisbon party is completely out of the game.
And even Libertas Declan Ganley had been lost, didn't manage to get a seat.
But even the left side in the Irish, the anti-Lisbon Treaty camps on the left side of politics are also taken out of the election this year.
Alex, do you think we're going to have a very quiet summer in Brussels?
Well, I like to look ahead. I think that the Lisbon Treaty, is something that we're going to have to look at and see how we can get it passed in Ireland. I'm a pro-European, so I can safely say that. But looking one step ahead, what are we going to do after that? I mean, if we want more European integration, if it's hard for us to get the Lisbon Treaty passed, any step further forward is going to be even more difficult. And I think that's something that we're going to have to think about over the summer.
Martens was saying in an interview on Sunday night, Wilfried Martens, the chairman of the EPP, he was saying, well, we should move towards the possibility of an elected president of the European Commission. Lisbeth, surely that would be something you would support?
I'd say it would boost people's interest in going for the ballots, that's for sure.
Yeah.
I think we will have a quiet summer. But I don't hope that it's going to be quiet all the time it's going to take to get the Lisbon Treaty in place, and I don't see why it should. I mean, to this very day there has not been any Lisbon Treaty, and still the system has functioned. So I think that's just a bad excuse for not getting something done. It's been quiet for a long time because we have been waiting for a new parliament to get elected. We're still waiting for the new commission to kick in, but once that has happened, I don't see any reason why the EU machinery should not really get back to business.
One final topic. Before the end of the year, we have the climate summit in Copenhagen. Stafford, in your neck of the woods, there's a few companies that make solar panels, funded also with, or started with support from the European Commission. Can that have a significant economic impact?
I'm a wee bit sceptical about this. About a year ago, I did a series of interviews on new energy in the context of a mine water program, where they're using water from old mine shafts to heat and cool areas of the city of Heerlen in South Limburg. And talking to the experts, they would say things to me like, well, you know, new energy is clearly a focus, but think about it a little bit. You know, if you really want windmills all over the place, the best thing is to put them in the North Sea, and then you've got to build a separate infrastructure. Don't ever forget coal as another thing. And of course, we all know we can't forget nuclear. But there is, in South Limburg, there is now a focus at the Avantis cross-border business park on solar energy. There's a solar educational college. There's a photovoltaic panel producer. I think there are 3 or 4 companies focused on that. There are windmills all over the place. I can't say I really like them very much.
Alex, one word on climate before we go?
Well, I think that there's a lot of money going into it from the Commission. On the member state level, I think that it's the citizens who can actually make a difference. I mean, even if you put some solar panels in your house, you know, you can actually make a difference. You know, save some you know, energy. That being said, the information is just not there. There are some subsidies you can get from the EU, but no one knows anything about them. Governments sometimes keep them on the down low because the national power companies have to benefit from it. So I think this is where we should shift focus to the citizen, how the citizen can take part.
Lisbeth?
Well, I can say it's 3 years ago I installed the solar panels on my house and I halved my energy bill. There's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't do it. To my opinion, it's so easy. I mean, the system figures out when there's enough heat from above, it doesn't spend any fuel or gas. If there's not enough, okay, it will add what is missing. It's extremely simple. And it has to come from the business, it has to come from the citizens. Of course, the climate summit can help on the global scale of it, but I think that maybe if anything good is going to come out of this economical crisis, it will be a shift in the way that we deal with energy and the way we produce our stuff, the way we transport it around the globe, and the way we live our lives.
Okay, I want to leave it at that. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for watching this debate. I know it's been 30 minutes. It's a long time to watch on the internet. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope this is not going to be the last time that we did such debate. Thanks also to the staff here, the technical staff at the European Commission, for assisting us today in recording this program.